You can start unclogging your arteries and restoring healthy blood flow by adding a specific drink to your daily routine, but you must first understand that plaque is not the enemy you think it is. Most people believe plaque is just grease floating in the blood that gets stuck, but the reality is that plaque is a response to damage that has already occurred. If you only focus on lowering your blood pressure or lowering your cholesterol without fixing the reason the plaque is forming in the first place, you are only treating the smoke and ignoring the fire. I am Dr. Ben Harris, and today I am going to walk you through the steps to heal your arteries from the inside out, leading up to the powerful drink that accelerates this process. There is a specific order to healing your cardiovascular system that most people get wrong. You might be tempted to just take a supplement or drink a mixture and hope for the best, but the internal environment of your blood vessels matters more than anything else. I will share the exact recipe for the drink and the best time to take it later in this video, but first, we must activate the body's natural repair systems so the drink can actually do its job. Number 1. Focus on repairing the endothelial layer to boost nitric oxide. This is the most critical step that is often overlooked in standard checkups. The endothelium is a single layer of cells that lines the entire inside of your arteries. When this layer is healthy, your blood flows smoothly and your blood pressure regulates itself naturally. However, when this layer gets damaged, it triggers a cascade of problems that leads to heart attacks and strokes. I recall a patient named Arthur who came to see me because he was confused and frustrated. Arthur was 72 years old and had been diligent about taking his medication to lower his blood pressure for over a decade. Despite his medication, his doctor told him his arteries were becoming stiffer and he was at risk for a blockage. Arthur told me, "I did everything right. I lowered the pressure, so why are my arteries still getting worse?" Arthur's mistake was assuming that lower pressure meant healthy arteries. He did not realize that the medication was forcing the pressure down, but it was not healing the inner lining of his blood vessels. The inflammation was still there. We changed his focus from just manipulating the numbers to actually healing that single layer of cells. And within months, he noticed he had more energy and his doctor saw improvements in his circulation. The reason this happens is simple. When the endothelial layer is damaged, your body tries to patch it up. It sends calcium, cholesterol, and protein to the site of the injury to act like a bandage. We call this bandage plaque. So, you must realize that plaque is actually a reparative action. It is your body trying to save you from a rupture. If you have plaque, it means you have inflammation and damage to this lining. One of the major consequences of this damage is the loss of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas produced by your body that tells your arteries to relax and open up. It is a vasodilator. When you have endothelial damage, your nitric oxide levels drop. This causes the arteries to tighten, which raises your blood pressure and increases the risk of clots. In fact, 90% of heart attacks involve clots, and low nitric oxide is a major contributor to this risk. To start fixing this, you must do things that naturally boost nitric oxide. A very simple way to do this immediately is to be conscious of how you breathe. Breathing through your nose rather than your mouth actually increases the production of nitric oxide. It is a simple mechanism, but it signals the body to dilate the blood vessels. Another aspect of getting an accurate picture of your artery health is ensuring you are measuring your blood pressure correctly at home. If you are stressed or positioned poorly, you might think your condition is worse than it is, which causes more stress and more damage. When you measure your blood pressure, sit quietly for 5 minutes before you put the cuff on. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor and your back is supported. Do not talk during the reading. And crucially, make sure the cuff is the right size for your arm. If the cuff is too small, it will give you a falsely high reading. By getting accurate numbers, you stop reacting to false alarms and can focus on the real work of healing the endothelium. This brings us to the next step in the process, which addresses how your body handles the cholesterol that is already there. Number 2, activate reverse cholesterol transport. This is a concept that very few people talk about, but it is vital for clearing out arteries that have already started to narrow. We often hear about cholesterol going into the arteries, but we rarely hear about the body's natural system for taking it out. This process is called reverse cholesterol transport, or RCT. I want to tell you about a patient named Clara. Clara was 66, and she was terrified of eating anything with fat in it because she had been told that cholesterol was clogging her pipes. She was eating dry toast and salads with no dressing, yet her blood work showed that her body was still struggling with vascular health. She felt weak, and her skin was dry and papery. Clara's mistake was thinking that dietary cholesterol was the main enemy. The reality is that your body makes most of the cholesterol in your bloodstream because it is necessary for healing and for making hormones. The problem is not the existence of cholesterol, but the inability of the body to recycle it properly. We shifted Clara's diet to support her liver and her good cholesterol, and she not only felt stronger, but her markers for vascular health improved. Reverse cholesterol transport is the mechanism where your body takes the cholesterol buildup from the arteries and transports it back to the liver to be recycled or eliminated. You want to support this process. One of the key players in this is HDL. You often hear HDL called good cholesterol, and this is why. HDL is like the cleanup crew that picks up the cholesterol from the peripheral parts of the body, including the arteries, and carries it back to the liver. So, having healthy levels of HDL is essential for unclogging arteries. There are specific nutrients and habits that support this transport system. Niacin, which is vitamin B3, is known to greatly help remove cholesterol from the arteries and support this recycling process. It is one of the most effective nutrients for optimizing this pathway. However, you must be careful with niacin if you are prone to flushing or have liver issues, so always start with small amounts or consult your healthcare provider. But generally, ensuring you have adequate B vitamins is a strong step toward vascular health. Another factor here is the role of bile. Your liver uses bile salts to break down fats and to help root excess cholesterol out of the body. If you have sluggish bile flow, or if you have had your gallbladder removed, you might have a harder time getting rid of that excess cholesterol. A recent study highlighted the importance of bile acids in cholesterol metabolism, showing that when bile flow is optimized, the body is much more efficient at clearing lipids from the bloodstream. This confirms that liver health is artery health. They are connected. So, to support this step, you want to focus on foods and habits that support the liver and bile production. Bitter greens like arugula or dandelion greens are excellent for this. But beyond just moving the cholesterol, we have to stop the chemical reaction that causes the vessel walls to rust and become sticky in the first place. Comment your age and your usual top number range for your blood pressure below. It helps the community see that they are not alone in dealing with these variations. Number 3. Eliminate the insulin toxicity that rusts the vessels. This is perhaps the most significant root cause of arterial damage in the modern world. We are often told that salt is the enemy of blood pressure, but sugar and insulin are far more destructive to the endothelial lining. High levels of insulin act like a corrosive agent in your blood vessels, and this damage is what invites the plaque to form. Let me share the story of Robert. Robert was 68 and he came to me insisting that he was healthy because his fasting blood glucose was always in the normal range. However, he carried a lot of weight around his midsection and he was constantly tired after meals. He told me, "Dr. Ben, my sugar is fine, so I don't need to change my diet." Robert's mistake is a very common one. He was looking at his blood sugar, but he was not looking at his insulin. You see, your body has a protective mechanism. Sugar is toxic to your arteries. It is like sandpaper that scrapes the inside of the vessel. Because it is so dangerous, your pancreas pumps out insulin to remove the sugar from the blood as fast as possible. Robert had normal blood sugar because his insulin was working overtime. It was like a vacuum cleaner running at maximum power to keep the carpet clean. But eventually the vacuum cleaner burns out. This state of high insulin can last for 15 to 20 years before your blood sugar finally starts to rise. By the time you see high blood sugar, the damage has been happening for decades. We placed Robert on a nutrition plan that drastically lowered his insulin requirement. Within weeks, the weight around his midsection began to drop, which is a sign that visceral fat and liver fat were decreasing. His energy stabilized, and his blood pressure naturally came down because his arteries were no longer inflamed by high insulin. If you want to unclog your arteries, you must stop putting the rust in. The average person consumes between 50 to 100 teaspoons of sugar every day if you count the hidden sugars in breads, pastas, and processed foods. A normal level of blood sugar effectively equals only about 1 teaspoon of sugar in your entire bloodstream. So when you dump 50 teaspoons into the system, your body goes into emergency mode. The most effective way to reverse this is through a low-carbohydrate diet. This is not just about weight loss, it is about saving your arteries. When you lower the carbohydrates, you stop the massive spikes in insulin. This gives the endothelial layer a chance to heal. Furthermore, a low-carb diet is incredibly effective at removing fat from the liver. You can remove up to 40% of liver fat within just 14 days on a strict low-carb regimen. When the liver is free of fat, it can do its job of processing cholesterol and toxins much more effectively. If you are monitoring your blood sugar at home, it is important to understand the context of your numbers. A fasting reading in the morning tells you one thing, but checking your numbers 2 hours after a meal tells you how well your body handled that food. A recent analysis of glucose monitoring suggests that post-meal spikes are significantly more damaging to the blood vessel walls than a steady, slightly elevated baseline. This means avoiding those big spikes from sugary or starchy meals is the best thing you can do for your arteries today. If you use insulin or glucose-lowering medication, please check your readings frequently when you change your diet, because changes in food intake will affect your blood sugar and you may need to adjust your medication with your doctor's help to avoid lows. This leads us to the mineral that controls the tension in your artery walls. Number 4. Increase magnesium to relax the arterial muscle. Once we have stopped the damage from sugar and started the repair of the lining, we need to address the stiffness of the arteries. Your arteries are not just pipes, they have a muscular layer that expands and contracts. This muscle is controlled by a balance of minerals, specifically calcium and magnesium. I remember treating a patient named Elena. Elena was 74 and suffered from leg cramps at night and consistently high blood pressure. She was taking calcium supplements because she was worried about her bones, but she was not taking any magnesium. She told me, "I feel like my whole body is just tight all the time." Elena's situation is a perfect example of a mineral imbalance. Calcium causes muscles to contract. Magnesium causes muscles to relax. This is true for the muscles in your legs, and it is true for the muscles wrapped around your arteries. Because Elena was overloading on calcium without enough magnesium, her arteries were in a chronic state of constriction. We adjusted her routine to include magnesium-rich foods and a gentle magnesium supplement. The cramps disappeared, but more importantly, her systolic blood pressure, the top number, began to settle down because her arteries were finally able to relax. Magnesium is often called the master controller over calcium. If you have too much calcium and not enough magnesium, that calcium can end up depositing in the soft tissues, like your arteries, turning them stiff. This is arterial calcification. Magnesium helps prevent this by balancing the effect of calcium. Unfortunately, it is difficult to get enough magnesium from modern food because our soil is often depleted. However, you can focus on foods like pumpkin seeds, spinach, and avocados. For many older adults, a supplement like magnesium glycinate is helpful because it is easy on the digestive system and very absorbable. If you are looking for a simple, same-day way to help lower your blood pressure using this principle of relaxation, try a simple breathing exercise. Sit comfortably and breathe in slowly for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and exhale slowly for 8 seconds. This rhythmic breathing stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, which signals your arteries to relax, mimicking the effect of magnesium. By ensuring you have enough magnesium, you are preparing the physical structure of the artery to be flexible. This flexibility is required for the drink I will mention later to work effectively, as the drink increases blood flow, and we need the pipes to be able to expand to accommodate that flow. This sets the stage for the next crucial nutrient, which acts like a traffic director for calcium, ensuring it goes into your bones and not your heart. Number 5. Direct the calcium to the right place with vitamin K2. You simply cannot talk about unclogging arteries without addressing where the calcium in your body is going. We just discussed how magnesium helps relax the artery, but we need another player to physically move the calcium out of the soft tissues and into the skeletal system where it belongs. This is the job of vitamin K2. I want to tell you about a patient named Martha. Martha was 71 years old and she was very diligent about her health. She had been diagnosed with early-stage osteoporosis, which is a thinning of the bones. Her doctor at the time told her to take high doses of calcium to strengthen her skeleton. She did this religiously for 5 years. However, when she came to see me, she was confused because her bone density hadn't improved much, but her blood pressure had gone up significantly. Martha's mistake was taking calcium in isolation. Imagine you are hiring a delivery truck to bring bricks to a construction site. That is the calcium. But if you don't have a foreman at the site telling the driver where to put the bricks, the driver might just dump them in the middle of the road. In your body, the road is your artery. Because Martha lacked the foreman, which is vitamin K2, the calcium she was taking was being deposited into her arterial walls, making them stiff and narrow. This is why her blood pressure rose. The vessels could no longer expand to accommodate blood flow. We immediately adjusted Martha's regimen. We didn't stop supporting her bones, but we introduced vitamin K2, specifically in the MK7 form, which is the version that stays active in the body longer. Over the next year, her arterial stiffness measurements improved because her body finally had the instruction manual on where to place the minerals. Vitamin K2 activates a specific protein called matrix glyprotein. This protein acts like a claw that scrapes calcium out of the arteries and soft tissues. At the same time, it activates osteocalcin, which anchors that calcium into the bone. So, K2 is doing double duty. It is unclogging the arteries while simultaneously strengthening the bones. This is incredibly important for anyone concerned about blood pressure. Stiff arteries force your heart to pump harder, raising your top number. By preventing calcification, you keep the vessels elastic. You can get vitamin K2 from certain fermented foods like natto, or from high-quality animal fats like grass-fed butter, egg yolks, and soft cheeses. However, because modern diets are often low in these specific fats, many older adults benefit from a supplement. If you are on blood-thinning medication, specifically warfarin or Coumadin, you must speak with your doctor before adding vitamin K2, as it can interfere with how those drugs work. But for most others, this is a critical, unclogging nutrient. Here is a simple thought to keep in mind. Calcium hardens whatever it touches. You want hard bones, not hard hearts. Vitamin K2 is the difference between the two. Number 6. Harness the solar connection to expand your vessels. We often think of food and drink as the only fuel for our bodies, but light is also a form of nutrition that your arteries crave. The sun provides two distinct benefits that directly help in unclogging arteries and lowering blood pressure, and neither involves swallowing a pill. Let me introduce you to James. James was a 69-year-old retired accountant. He spent 40 years of his life working in an office under fluorescent lights, and in his retirement, he spent most of his time indoors watching television or reading. James had stubbornly high blood pressure that would not budge, even with diet changes. He felt lethargic and his skin had a grayish, unhealthy pallor. James's mistake was living a life disconnected from natural light. He was deficient in vitamin D, which is essential, but he was also missing out on infrared energy. When I simply asked James to sit on his porch for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the late afternoon, he was skeptical. He asked, "Dr. Ben, how is sitting going to help my blood pressure?" 6 weeks later, James's numbers had dropped by 10 points. He hadn't changed his medication. He had simply exposed his skin to the sun. There are two mechanisms happening here. First, when sunlight hits your skin, your body produces vitamin D. Vitamin D is technically a hormone, and it is one of the most potent inhibitors of inflammation in the body. If plaque is caused by inflammation, vitamin D is the fire extinguisher. Low levels of vitamin D are consistently linked to higher risk of heart attacks and strokes. But the second mechanism is even more fascinating and works much faster. About half of the sun's energy is infrared light. You cannot see it, but you can feel it as warmth. Infrared light penetrates deep into your body, going several inches into the tissue. This light stimulates the water inside your cells to build a charge, which helps blood flow. Even more importantly, sunlight triggers your skin to release massive amounts of nitric oxide, that same gas we talked about earlier that dilates arteries. So by simply being outside, James was flooding his bloodstream with a natural vasodilator. A recent observational study confirmed that people who live in higher latitudes with less sunlight have generally higher blood pressure and higher rates of cardiovascular disease compared to those closer to the equator, even when correcting for diet. This suggests that the sun itself is a regulator of arterial pressure. To do this safely, you do not need to burn. In fact, you should never burn. You just need gentle exposure. Morning sun is often the best because it is less harsh. Expose as much skin as you are comfortable with. Arms and legs are great. If you cannot get outside due to weather or mobility, red light therapy devices can mimic some of these infrared benefits, though the real sun is always superior because it provides the full spectrum. If you are diabetic, this is also helpful because vitamin D plays a significant role in insulin sensitivity. The better your insulin works, the less insulin you need, and the less damage you do to your arterial walls. Number 7. The primary ingredient, exercise in a cup. Now we arrive at the core ingredient of the drink that can help unclog your arteries. This ingredient is so powerful that researchers have compared its effects directly to physical activity. It is cacao. I want to be very clear here. I am talking about cacao, not common chocolate milk powder or sugary candy bars. Cacao is the raw, unroasted, or minimally processed bean. I remember a patient named Linda. Linda was 75 and suffered from severe arthritis in her knees. She knew she needed to exercise to help her heart and her blood sugar, but the pain was too intense. She was in a vicious cycle. Her inactivity was making her arteries stiffer, which made her feel worse, which made her move less. She asked me, "Is there anything I can do that doesn't involve running?" Linda's mistake was thinking that movement was the only way to stimulate her cardiovascular system. While movement is vital, we found a way to mimic some of the biochemical effects of exercise using cacao. We added a specific cacao drink to her daily routine. After a few weeks, Linda reported that her hands and feet felt warmer. This is a classic sign of improved peripheral circulation. Her blood pressure readings began to trend down, and because she felt better, she actually started doing gentle chair exercises. Here is how it works. Cacao is packed with a type of plant nutrient called flavonols. These flavonols are like a key that unlocks the nitric oxide factory inside your endothelial cells. Remember the enzyme machine we talked about? Cacao stimulates that machine. In a remarkable study, researchers compared the vasodilation, the widening of the blood vessels, from consuming high flavonol cacao against the vasodilation from moderate exercise. The results were startlingly similar. The cacao triggered a significant increase in blood flow and a reduction in arterial stiffness. Another study looked at people between 50 and 80 years old who consumed cacao daily for just 2 weeks. They found that the arterial stiffness in these older adults improved so much that their vessels began to resemble those of people 20 years younger. It is essentially anti-aging for your arteries. But you have to choose the right type. Most cocoa powder you see in the store has been Dutch processed or alkalized. This means it has been washed with a solution to make it less bitter and darker. Unfortunately, this processing destroys up to 90% of the helpful flavonols. You want to look for raw cacao powder or non-alkalized cocoa. It will be lighter in color and have a more bitter, complex taste. This ingredient helps with blood sugar as well. Cacao has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, meaning it helps your cells accept sugar from the blood, reducing the amount of insulin your pancreas has to pump out. This protects the endothelial lining from further damage. This brings us to the final component, which acts as the fuel for the engine we just started. Number 8. The accelerator and the specific recipe. If cacao is the spark that starts the engine, this next ingredient is the high-octane fuel. To get the maximum unclogging effect, I recommend combining cacao with beetroot powder. Let me explain the synergy here using a story about my own routine. I used to drink just coffee in the morning. I enjoyed it, but I noticed that by mid-morning, I would have a slight crash, and my blood pressure would sometimes tick up slightly due to the caffeine stress. I decided to experiment based on the research. I started combining cacao and beet powder. The difference was noticeable within days. I felt a sustained, calm energy, not the jittery energy of caffeine, but a steady flow. My focus improved, and my own blood pressure readings were consistently perfect. Here is why this combination works. Beetroot is one of the richest natural sources of nitrates. Your body converts these nitrates directly into nitric oxide. So, while cacao stimulates the enzymes to make nitric oxide, beetroot provides the raw materials. When you put them together, you are attacking the problem from both sides. You are providing the fuel and speeding up the factory. Now, let's talk about the specific recipe and how to make it so you don't ruin the benefits. You will need 1 teaspoon of organic raw cacao powder, 1 teaspoon of organic beetroot powder, 1 cup of warm water. Optional, a pinch of monk fruit or stevia if you need it sweet but avoid sugar. Optional, a splash of coconut milk or almond milk for creaminess. There are 3 rules for preparation that you must follow to get the medical benefits. First, do not use boiling water. Boiling water can degrade the delicate nutrients in the raw cacao and the beetroot. Heat the water until it is warm to the touch, comfortable to drink, but not scalding. Second, timing matters. Do not drink this at the exact same time as your coffee or strong tea. The caffeine in coffee is a vasoconstrictor. It tightens blood vessels. If you drink them together, the coffee fights against the opening effect of the cacao and beets. I recommend having this drink either as a replacement for coffee or at least 90 minutes before or after your coffee. Third, be consistent. The studies show that the benefits of these flavonols are cumulative. It builds up in your system. You are retraining your arteries to be flexible. It is not a one-time fix. It is a daily therapy. A note of caution, if you are prone to kidney stones, be aware that beets and cacao both contain oxalates. In this case, you may want to skip the beet powder and stick to just the cacao, and make sure you are staying well hydrated with plain water throughout the day. Also, if you have low blood pressure naturally, monitor how you feel, as this combination is quite effective at lowering pressure and could make you lightheaded if you are already low. Also, if you are seeing a doctor for diabetes or hypertension, let them know you are using dietary strategies to improve your numbers. As your arteries become more flexible and your insulin sensitivity improves, your medication needs might change, and only your doctor can safely adjust those for you. Number 9. Recruit the microscopic army in your gut to lower pressure. We have discussed the heart, the arteries, and the blood, but we have not yet talked about the engine room that processes all the nutrients we need for vascular health, your gut microbiome. There is a direct communication line between the bacteria in your digestive system and the stiffness of your arteries. We call this the gut-heart axis. I recall a patient named Samuel. Samuel was 70 years old and had struggled with stubborn hypertension for years. He was also dealing with constant bloating and indigestion, which he dismissed as just getting old. He told me, "Dr. Ben, I take my blood pressure pills, I eat my fiber, but my numbers are still roller coastering." Samuel's mistake was treating his stomach and his heart as 2 separate systems. He didn't realize that the inflammation in his gut was leaking into his bloodstream, causing systemic inflammation that kept his arteries irritated and clamped shut. When the gut barrier is compromised, sometimes called leaky gut, toxins spill into the blood. Your body reacts by stiffening the vessel walls to protect tissues, which raises blood pressure. We focused on repairing Samuel's gut flora. We introduced specific strains of probiotics, particularly lactobacillus, which has been shown in studies to help lower blood pressure. We also removed inflammatory irritants like gluten and processed seed oils that were disrupting his microbiome. Within 3 months, Samuel's digestion settled, but the surprise for him was his blood pressure. It stabilized significantly. He wasn't just digesting food better, He was absorbing the magnesium and vitamin K2 we talked about earlier much more efficiently. Recent research supports this connection. A study published in a major hypertension journal found that imbalances in gut bacteria are directly linked to higher blood pressure readings. The study suggested that certain bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids when they digest fiber, and these fatty acids act as signaling molecules to relax blood vessels. To apply this, you don't necessarily need expensive supplements. You can start by incorporating small amounts of fermented foods into your diet. Sauerkraut, kimchi, or plain kefir, if you tolerate dairy, are excellent. These foods act as fertilizer and seeds for good bacteria. However, if you have a condition like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, you must be careful with fermented foods as they can cause bloating. In that case, start with a simple probiotic supplement approved by your doctor. Remember, you are not just what you eat. You are what you absorb. If your gut is inflamed, you are not absorbing the nutrients needed to unclog your arteries. Number 10. Swap the oil in your engine to reduce friction. Just like a car runs poorly if you use dirty or the wrong type of oil, your cardiovascular system suffers when the balance of fats in your blood is off. I am not talking about cholesterol here. I am talking about the balance between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret was 67 and prided herself on eating a heart-healthy diet. She cooked everything with corn oil and sunflower oil because she had been told for decades that animal fats were dangerous. Despite her efforts, her markers for inflammation, specifically a test called C-reactive protein, were sky high, and her arteries showed signs of significant plaque buildup. Margaret's mistake was consuming an excess of omega-6 fatty acids, which are found in most vegetable and seed oils. While we need a small amount of omega-6, the modern diet is drowning in it. When the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is too high, it creates a pro-inflammatory state. It makes the blood thicker and more prone to clotting, and it irritates the endothelial lining. We swapped Margaret's cooking oils. We threw out the corn and canola oil and replaced them with fruit oils like olive oil and avocado oil and stable animal fats like butter or ghee. Then, we dramatically increased her intake of omega-3s. The change in her blood work was remarkable. Her inflammation markers dropped by half in 6 months. Her blood became less sticky, reducing her clotting risk, and her blood pressure improved because the artery walls were less inflamed. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA found in fatty fish, are critical for keeping the artery walls flexible. They essentially lubricate the system. A high-quality fish oil supplement or eating sardines, salmon, or mackerel 3 times a week can be a game-changer for older adults. If you are a senior, you want to be careful with the source of your fish oil to avoid heavy metals. Look for brands that are molecularly distilled, and if you are on blood thinners, consult your doctor, as omega-3s have a natural blood-thinning effect, which is good for the heart, but needs to be managed if you are on medication. This supports the unclogging process by ensuring that new plaque doesn't form. You are removing the irritation that triggers the plaque in the first place. Here is another simple habit to check your status. Ask your doctor for an omega-3 index test. It is a simple blood test that tells you exactly how much healthy fat is in your red blood cell membranes. Most people are dangerously low. Number 11. The cortisol clamp and the sleep wash. You can drink all the cacao in the world, but if your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight mode, your arteries will remain constricted. This brings us to the impact of stress hormones, specifically cortisol, and the critical importance of deep sleep. I want to share the story of David. David was 75, a retired engineer who still consulted on projects. He was a night owl, often staying up until 1 a.m. working or watching news, then sleeping for 5 or 6 hours. He came to me because his morning blood pressure was consistently in the danger zone, despite being normal in the evenings. David's mistake was interfering with his body's nightly wash cycle. During deep sleep, your brain and your vascular system undergo a cleaning process. The glymphatic system opens up to wash away toxins. Furthermore, sleep is when your cortisol levels should drop to their lowest point. Because David was staying up late with artificial light and mental stimulation, his cortisol remained high. Cortisol does one thing very effectively. It clamps down on blood vessels to keep blood pressure high so you can fight the tiger. If the tiger is just the 11 p.m. news, you are damaging your heart for no reason. We instituted a strict digital sunset for David. No screens after 9 p.m. We also used a simple magnesium lotion on his legs to promote relaxation. It took a few weeks to retrain his rhythm, but once he started getting 7 hours of quality sleep, his morning spikes disappeared. For seniors, sleep architecture changes. You might find yourself waking up more often. This is normal, but we want to maximize the deep phases of sleep. One helpful lever for this is temperature. Keep your bedroom cool. A drop in core body temperature is a signal to the body to enter deep sleep. Another lever is light. Get that morning sunlight we talked about earlier. It sets the timer for melatonin release 12 hours later. If you wake up in the middle of the night, do not look at the clock. Looking at the clock triggers math anxiety, calculating how much sleep you are losing, which spikes cortisol and clamps the arteries again. Just rest and focus on slow breathing. Number 12. The hidden salt versus the potassium pump. We cannot conclude a discussion on blood pressure without addressing the electrolyte balance that physically drives the pressure. Most people are terrified of the salt shaker, but they are ignoring the real issue, the lack of potassium. I remember a patient named Alice. Alice was 68 and she was terrified of salt. She ate bland food and avoided adding salt to anything. Yet her blood pressure was borderline high. She felt weak and her legs felt heavy. Alice's mistake was focusing on sodium reduction without thinking about potassium replacement. Your body uses a sodium-potassium pump to regulate fluid in your cells and blood vessels. For every molecule of sodium you want to excrete, you need a molecule of potassium to push it out. Because Alice was eating mostly processed, low-fat foods and breads, she was getting hidden sodium but almost no vegetables, which are the source of potassium. We actually had Alice add a pinch of high-quality sea salt to her food, which made her enjoy eating again, but we massively increased her intake of potassium-rich foods. We added avocados, winter squash, and beet tops. Don't throw away the greens when you use the beets for your drink. Her energy returned because her electrolytes were balanced, and her blood pressure actually went down despite adding a little salt, because the potassium allowed her kidneys to function properly and flush out the excess fluid. Seniors need to be aiming for about 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. Most people barely get 1,500. You don't need a supplement for this. In fact, high-dose potassium supplements can be dangerous for the heart rhythm and should only be taken if prescribed. Food is the safest and most effective source. If you have kidney disease, this rule changes. You must follow your nephrologist's guide on potassium. But for most people with essential hypertension, the potassium pump is the missing link to relaxing the fluid pressure in the arteries. Now, let's bring this all together into a complete protocol. We have covered a lot of ground, and I want you to see how these 12 steps fit together into a cohesive lifestyle that heals your arteries. You are going to start by measuring your blood pressure correctly so you have a baseline. You are going to focus on nose breathing and correcting your posture to allow immediate flow. You are going to adopt a low-carbohydrate nutritional approach to stop the insulin rust from damaging your vessel linings. This will also help clear the fat from your liver, allowing it to process cholesterol properly. You are going to introduce the right nutrients: magnesium to relax the muscle wall, vitamin K2 to move calcium out of the arteries and into the bones, and omega-3s to lubricate the blood and lower inflammation. You are going to harness the power of nature by getting daily sunlight for vitamin D and infrared energy, and you are going to prioritize your sleep to lower the cortisol clamp. You are going to fix your gut health with fermented foods to stop the leak of toxins into your bloodstream, and you are going to balance your electrolytes by eating potassium-rich vegetables. And finally, you are going to use the specific exercise in a cup drink, the combination of raw cacao and beetroot powder, to stimulate the production of nitric oxide, opening up those healed arteries and restoring the flow of life to every organ in your body. It seems like a lot, but you don't have to do it all at once. Pick one thing from this list to start today. Maybe it's just the drink. Maybe it's just the breathing. Once that becomes a habit, add the next one. Your arteries are living tissue. They are not old, rusty pipes that are doomed to fail. They have the capacity to heal, to relax, and to clear out if you give them the right environment. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your health journey. If you know someone over 50 who is struggling with their numbers and could benefit from this roadmap, please share this video with them. And subscribe for more simple, science-backed blood pressure and blood sugar tips. I'm Dr. Ben Harris, and I'll see you in the next video.